improve the public health, including the Consumer Federation of America, Center for the Science in the Public Interest, Pew Charitable Trust, Consumers Union oppose this amendment. I urge my colleagues to heed their advice and oppose this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from
I'd like to
the gentleman from Michigan recognize?
Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Benishek. I appreciate that. The gentleman's amendment, by requiring FDA to conduct scientific and economic analysis prior to enforcing these regulations, is a step in the right direction. Quite simply put, it is a step in the right direction. I commend him. I support his amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Michigan.
Well, I'd like to reclaim the remainder of my time. I really appreciate the gentlewoman's comments, and I'm certainly willing to work with you in the future on this issue. But we're just concerned that we're not going to make food any safer, but it's not going to help the jobs and the cost of our food, because some of the rules are very difficult to comply with at the local level. The difficulty in keeping wildlife away from apple orchards, for example, is very difficult and more costly than I think the gentlelady suspects. So I encourage everyone to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentlewoman is recognized.
I would just say to my colleague that all of those arguments were debated and discussed during the time of the Food Safety Modernization Act. As I say, I've worked very, very hard along with members of the Energy and Commerce Committee, in which jurisdiction this effectually resides. It does not reside in the jurisdiction of the Farm Bill. The fact of the matter is that we have industry support of the legislation. I have a white paper, a summary by the United Fresh Producers Association issued in January 2011, which talks about all of the flexibility that exists for small farmers. The issue is here about public health and public safety, and it is about, we have just recently said, as I say,
has expired.
I recommend that we oppose this amendment.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan.
I'll yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 52, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 52, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Backus of Alabama.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Backus, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The gentleman from Alabama is now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring a very simple but a very important amendment for consideration. Several agencies of government have small business review panels. They're advisory in nature. And as our agencies go through the rulemaking process, they get input on how their regulations will affect small businesses. And this amendment really takes advantage of the Regulatory Flexibility Act, which was signed into law by President Clinton in 1996, which allows the agencies to form these panels. Mr. Burrow of Georgia, myself, Mr. Graves of Missouri, and Mr. Matheson actually in the next week or two will be introducing language to really improve these small business panels. The SBA Advocacy Office recently said that small businesses pay about 45% more and annual cost in complying with regulations. and they spoke very favorably of these panels. I have a letter I'd ask unanimous consent to introduce from the NFIB urging strong support for this amendment. And with that, I will reserve my time. I will yield to the gentleman.
The gentleman's request is covered by the general leave to print.
Yes.
But the gentleman can yield to the gentleman.
I yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma as the chairman of the...
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Just to note that the ranking member and I have discussed your amendment. We are supportive. Thank you for your efforts. Yield back.
With that, I think I'll surrender the balance of my time. And I do want to say that as the chairman knows, the Judiciary Committee as well as the Small Business Committee has been looking at the effect of regulations on small businesses, and we've heard several horror stories, and I think this is I welcome and applaud the Agricultural Committee and its leadership for being in support of this committee, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Does any member claim time in opposition? The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Alabama. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 54, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, Amendment number 54, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Whitman of Virginia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the largest estuary in the United States, the Chesapeake Bay watershed is home to more than 16 million people. The watershed encompasses 6 states and the District of Columbia, well over 1,000 local governments, 150 major tributaries, 100,000 streams and rivers, and more than 11,600 miles of shoreline, plus thousands of plant and animal species. In addition to generating billions of dollars in economic activity and recreational revenue, the Bay provides tens of thousands of jobs in the commercial seafood and recreational fishing industries alone, and is the site of multiple major ports and military bases. The Bay draws millions of tourists each year. Clean and healthy waters encourage boating, fishing, and swimming, activities that are of great intrinsic value to the surrounding states and to our nation. The Bay watershed is also home to many farmers and agricultural lands. Virginia forestry and agriculture alone accounts for $79 billion in economic output and employs over 500,000 workers. Farmers have a vested interest in the clean Chesapeake Bay. Their commitment to the land and waters is reflected by multi-generational stewardship of farms across the watershed. My amendment includes similar legislation that passed in a bipartisan way in the House of Representatives in the 111th Congress by a vote of 418 to 1. Better accounting and more flexible management are essential to restoring the Chesapeake Bay. Cross-cut budgeting and adaptive management provide performance-based measures to assure federal dollars currently being spent on bay restoration activities produce results. Both techniques will ensure that we're coordinating how restoration dollars are spent and making sure that everyone understands how individual projects fit into the bigger picture. That way we're not duplicating efforts, spending money we don't need, or worse, working at cross purposes. Cross-cut budgeting, adaptive management, and an independent evaluator should be key components for the complex restoration activities for the Chesapeake Bay. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I reserve the balance of my time. I will yield. I yield to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Clearly, the gentleman is working diligently to do good things, and therefore I would be supportive of his amendment and yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Does any member claim time in opposition to the amendment? Seeing none, does the gentleman yield back?
Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 56, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. For what purposes the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 56, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Crawford of Arkansas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank the 71 members from both parties who joined in co-sponsoring the bill that is identical to this amendment, H.R. 311, the Fuels Act. That bill also passed the House unanimously last year. The EPA-mandated spill prevention and containment countermeasure rules requires that oil storage facilities with a capacity of over 1,320 gallons make costly infrastructure modifications to reduce the possibility of oil spills. This bill simply changes those standards, makes them considerably more workable. We have 71 co-sponsors that agree with me, and I will reserve the balance of my time at this point.
Gentleman reserves. Does any member claim time in opposition to the amendment? Gentleman from Arkansas.
I am happy to yield to the distinguished chairman of the Ag Committee for such time as he may consume.
And thank you, and I thank the subcommittee chairman, and once again, outstanding work being done, and I would encourage all of our fellow members of this great body to vote for your wonderful amendment, and yield back my time.
I thank the chairman, and with that, I urge a yes vote and yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 57, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. For what purposes, the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 57, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Mr. Crawford of Arkansas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The gentleman from Arkansas is now recognized.
I thank the chairman. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank the chairman. I want to thank my colleague from Nebraska for joining me in sponsoring this amendment. Earlier this year, as most of us already know, the EPA violated the privacy rights of producers across the country by releasing the personal information of livestock and poultry producers to various environmental activist groups. This information included names, addresses, phone numbers, GPS coordinates of over 80,000 producers over 30 states, including my home state of Arkansas. It was obtained by the EPA through state environmental quality agencies and released to the environmental groups through FOIA requests. We all know this story, and I'll be brief, and I will yield such time as my friend from Nebraska will consume.
Well, I thank you, my friend from Arkansas. And it's too bad that the E in EPA now means espionage, because the EPA rents airplanes and videotapes from the air farmers and ranchers and feedlots in their daily activities without any reason to think that they're violating any rule or regulation. So not only are they spying, but what is most concerning to those that have been videotaped by the EPA is that the EPA released the documents. We don't know how the environmental and animal rights groups found out that they were doing this, because the farmers didn't know it was going on. But through a FOIA request, the EPA turned over all of the documents about the farmers, ranchers, and feedlot owners with their personal identifiable information, their names and their addresses. And this has to stop. The people that have been victims of this videotaping and giving this information are really concerned. And so I thank the gentleman for his good amendment here and allowing me to join, because this protects their privacy rights in the future. Doesn't stop them from spying yet. Well, that'll be done on a different bill. But this at least protects their privacy, and I really appreciate it, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Nebraska and appreciate his leadership on this as well. The Crawford-Terry Amendment would prevent the EPA from making public the private information of producers, including their names, telephone numbers, addresses, email, and physical, GPS coordinates, or other identifying location information. This measure will protect the individual privacy rights of ag producers and allow farm families to live without the threats of harassment and targeting. I urge adoption of the amendment, and with that I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to reclaim the time of opposition.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Not to oppose the measure, but actually to speak on behalf of the amendment. The issues that have been raised here by this amendment, I think, are valid. They are concerns that have been raised by cattlemen and cattlewomen across the country. I think that obviously we all feel that there ought to be a level playing field when it comes to the protection of the Freedom of Information Act. But on the other hand, cattlemen and cattlewomen every day are working real hard to try to do their best to produce the safest and the highest quality beef that Americans do every day, and is the best in the world. And so we think this amendment is a step in the right direction, and would like to support the amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from...
I thank the gentleman from California for his support and would yield it to the distinguished chairman of the Ag Committee for such time as he may consume.
This is clearly a very important issue, and you gentlemen have made great headway on it. Thank you for those efforts, and of course, I'm very supportive of what you're endeavoring to do, and yield back.
I thank the chairman, and with that I will urge a yes vote and yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arkansas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Virginia, I see her. Yes. It is now in order to consider amendment number 58, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Part B, amendment number 58, printed in House Report number 113-117, offered by Ms. Fox of North Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 271, the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Ronald Reagan once said, "No government ever voluntarily reduces itself in size, so government's programs once launched never disappear. Actually, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth." Mr. Chairman, it's hard to argue with the Gipper. This amendment to H.R. 1947, the Federal Agriculture Reform and Risk Management Farm Act of 2013, will bring accountability to our work here in the House of Representatives. What it does is it sunsets discretionary programs in the bill upon the expiration of the 5-year authorization period. Now, some people might think that is the normal thing to happen in the federal government. You authorize a program, once the authorization goes away, the program either gets reauthorized or it goes away. But that isn't what happens, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this program is to force Congress to justify the continued existence of these programs through regular reauthorization efforts. Mr. Chairman, it forces us to do our jobs. If these programs and subsidies are left unchallenged, they will continue to consume taxpayer dollars forever without being approved explicitly by the members of Congress. As our national debt approaches $17 trillion, we can't afford to put all these programs on autopilot. This common sense amendment would require Congress to explicitly revive expired programs at the end of the authorization period and prevent the covert continuance of sometimes wasteful, ineffective, and duplicative programs. Ultimately, this amendment will prompt Congress and the public to re-examine thoughtfully these programs when the Farm Bill's authorization expires. Finally, this amendment will send a strong message to stakeholders, lobbyists, and special interests that many of these federal programs have an expiration date. Let me hasten to add, this common sense amendment would not eliminate or undermine the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP, and would not apply to the Farm Bill's mandatory spending provisions. I hope my colleagues will support this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the amendment before us.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. But before I state my opposition, I'd like to first thank Chairman Frank Lucas for the hard work that he and his committee staff has done today and throughout this year and last year in trying to put together not one but two farm bills for the consideration of the House and for America's heartland. And thank Ranking Member Colin Peterson and his staff for the hard work that they have done as well. These are never easy, but as both the chairman and the ranking member like to remind us, and I think it's an important underlying point, the Farm Bill that we reauthorize every 4 years is among the most bipartisan efforts that we ever do. And both the chair and the ranking member and their staff are to be commended. As it relates to this measure before us, this amendment, we believe that it uses a meat cleaver approach to the legislation. Like sequester, it doesn't discriminate among programs. It's a blind between those programs which deserve longer authorization periods and those that could use trimming. And clearly we understand the author's intent. The whole purpose of the Farm Bill, though, is to review programs under our jurisdiction to determine whether or not they should continue, whether they should be changed, or whether they should be eliminated. And once again, to commend the chair and the ranking member, we have done a very good job on that oversight on determining what areas ought to be trimmed, what programs ought to be consolidated, and which should be eliminated. Our bill already does that, and actually, as the chair has indicated and the ranking member, terminates hundreds of programs and consolidates. And it did the work, the committee did the work in a thoughtful and careful manner. So we can't support the bill, the amendment that undoes the careful work that the committee has pursued. I urge my colleagues to reject this haphazard approach or shotgun approach, we might say back home, and vote no on this amendment.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me add my thanks to the chairman also for his good work. I know that he has worked very, very hard on getting a bill here to us to vote on, and I commend him and the staff for doing that, and I was negligent in not saying that in the beginning of my remarks. So I thank the gentleman from California for his remarks and for reminding me that I should have done that. I want to say that this amendment does not limit in any way the ability of Congress to reauthorize an expired program. Congress is Congress and can pass any laws it wants in accordance with the Constitution, of course. But this amendment would require Congress to explicitly revive expired programs at the end of the authorization period. What we are trying to prevent is the covert continuance of programs that have not been authorized. We should hold ourselves to a high standard here, Mr. Chairman. We shouldn't be funding programs that aren't authorized. It's just saying we should abide by the laws we pass, and that's what this does. We need to ensure that Congress and the public will thoughtfully re-examine these programs and revive them where they need to be. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield to the chairman of the Ag Committee.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Gentleman from California is recognized.
As a member of the committee, I reserve the right to close.
And the gentleman might yield a little time to me.
Expired.
I yield to the chair.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding. And first, let me state the persuasive powers of the gentlelady are to be much respected and appreciated, occasionally even feared. While perhaps not every syllable of her amendments in their present form do I necessarily agree with, I am supportive. I believe she is on the right vein, and we will all work together to accomplish the ultimate goal. That said, though, I must also express my appreciation to all my colleagues, to the professional staff of both the majority and the professional staff of the minority. When we started this process earlier, I noted to all of you that I felt like if we would work this in regular order, if we would have discussion and amendment and great debate, we could achieve consensus. Now, we have approximately 5 more amendments to go tomorrow. We will conclude this experience on time. Hooray. And I believe in a fashion that is appropriate for this august body, which means I think we'll pass a bill. But we shall see tomorrow. That said, thank you all. This is the way the process is supposed to work. With that, I yield back to my good friend from California.
I think we've conducted the people's work today and this evening, and I yield back the balance of my time and thank the chair and again all those involved in this process, and hopefully tomorrow we can conclude our work.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider amendment number 61, printed in Part B of House Report 113-117. From what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise.
Question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Say, Mr. Chairman. Just say, Mr. Chairman, start us off.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
The gentleman hold that request in abeyance.
Of course.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Speaker, the Committee on the Whole House and the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 1947, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereof.
The Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 1947 and has come to no resolution thereon. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma rise?
Madam Speaker, I move we now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Members began work today on amendments to the Farm Bill, a measure that sets policies over 5 years for farm subsidies, crop insurance, and nutrition programs. The chamber debated and voted on several amendments, including one offered by Massachusetts Democrat Jim McGovern that would have restored $20 billion in cuts to food stamp programs. It failed 188 to 234. Members return tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern for more debate on amendments, with several votes expected. Live coverage of the House here on C-SPAN.